Hi there, and welcome to Beyond the Business Suit. I am so thrilled to be here today on this special LinkedIn Live where we are joined by my friend, an incredible human being, Minda Harts. And let me tell you, if you don't know about Minda, if you are not aware of Minda, let me tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll jump right in. So, Minda Harts is a best-selling author. She is a workplace consultant and one of today's most trusted voices on leadership and equity. She's the creator of the 7 Trust Languages framework, which helps leaders and organizations turn trust into their greatest competitive asset. Her books include The Memo and Right Within, and they have shaped conversations from the boardrooms to conference stages. And her upcoming book, which we will talk about today, is called Talk to Me Nice, the 7 Trust Languages for a Better Workplace, which comes out in July of 2025. This book is set to revolutionize how leaders and teams harness trust as their most valuable asset. So I am excited to welcome Minda to the stage. Welcome, Minda.
Hi, friend. How are you?
I am doing great. And, over the years, you and I have had so many great conversations. And I'm really excited about this one because one thing about our conversations is that we're going to tell the truth, right?
Always.
So there's always, so there is a lot of truth telling that takes place. And I am so excited for this conversation. And for those of you who are joining us, if you are joining in right now, put in the chat where you're joining us from. Would love to know that. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat and we will do our best to address the questions that come through on LinkedIn. So, Minda, first off, how are you feeling now that this book is about to enter the world? Because I remember us talking back in December of 2022, and you were saying, I have this new book idea, and it's all about trust. And I remember that conversation, and it was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. And here we are. Here we are. It's about to be birthed. So, how are you feeling?
Yes. Well, you were one of the first people that I started to talk out loud about what that next book would be about. And it just feels so good to finally be in a space where we're about to give birth to my, fourth book baby. And every book has been a little bit different, but some of the same through lines, and I'm just excited for us to figure out what we need in the workplace. And I think we need more trust.
Yes, yes. I was thinking about how, one of my favorite stats that I talk about often, especially when I talk to leaders about leadership presence, is that it only takes 250 milliseconds to demonstrate your leadership or make an impression about your leadership. And we make that impression by demonstrating two things: trustworthiness and
Mhm.
competence. So, will I do the job and can you trust me? And so, when I think about this topic of trust, it is so core to us as human beings, but also us as leaders. So, why do you think trust is the conversation we need to have right now?
Oh my God, where do I begin? The reason why it's so important is because what most people may not know is that they're going to spend 90,000 hours of their life in a workplace. And if we expect trust in our romantic relationships, we expect them in our platonic relationships, why wouldn't we expect it at a place we're going to spend so much time at? We know when trust is so important and a deal breaker or a red flag in our other relationships. So we should take that same energy into the workplace and say, you know what? Trust is just as important as anything else here. And so when I don't have it, what does it look like to ask for it? Right. And if it's never been built, how do I establish it? And I think it's some of those soft skills that we often don't think about that are actually the most important skills, which are leadership skills. And I'm excited to dig in deeper about what that could mean for people thinking about the workplace a little bit differently in terms of just thriving instead of surviving.
Yeah, and I keep coming back to this idea of trustworthiness. This is human. And
Yeah.
leadership, when it comes down to it, the best leaders are great humans. They demonstrate that they can be great humans. And, given where we are right now, trust is being eroded all over the place, right? People are not working with integrity, which leads to a lack of trust. And if we go back to 2020, you talk about this in Talk to Me Nice. In 2020, there were a lot of organizations making a lot of promises in the wake, especially of the tragic murder of George Floyd. And there were a lot of organizations saying a lot of things, right? Making commitments. And sadly, many of them did not fulfill those commitments. So, what happens when, trust is eroded, one, and two, how can organizations or leaders repair when trust has been eroded?
Yeah, it's so interesting because oftentimes people will say, can trust even be rebuilt once it's broken? And I believe yes, because if trust can be built, it can be broken. And if it can be broken, it can be rebuilt, right? But it takes
Mm,
intentionality in order to do that. And trust has to be a noun and a verb. It has to be demonstrated, it has to be an action. And I think it's unfortunate that some leaders, a year ago would say that to certain groups and stakeholders that you belong here. We are supporting your career, we're invested in your success. And then, months later, show a different sign of what that is. And that's the fastest way to erode trust. And now think about it. How does that impact your current workforce who was impacted by programs being taken away, by opportunities being stripped from them? Trust isn't just nice to have, it's good for business. When trust is present, 21% more of your employees, they're more productive, 50% more retention in the workplace, 40% less burnout. Trust is good for business. And so I think it's important for leaders to understand that what we say is very important because that impacts the productivity of our employees. So if we used to celebrate Juneteenth and now we don't anymore, how do you think that impacts your Black employees? Or if you had women's employee resource groups and now you don't, how do you think that impacts the mental health and wellness of your women on staff? Many of them are going to start looking for new jobs or wondering if they can have a career here. And I think trust is something that we can't keep in the basement. It has to be the main character in the room each and every day.
yeah. I know with any creative endeavor, when you are birthing something like this
Mhm.
into the world where there's so much, you know, passion around, right? And I get the sense that there was something inside of you that said, "Ooh, we need to talk about this." So, what was that catalyst for you? Like, what was it that said, "Okay, I need to talk about this."
Yes. Well, I think for me, it was really based on what we need in the workplace. And oftentimes we don't know how to ask for what we need, right? So part of what I'm about
Mhm.
to say is also rooted in self advocacy, letting people know what good looks like to you. I can't just walk into your office if you're my manager and say, I don't trust you anymore. I'm probably not going to get the results that I want, right?
Right?
Another erosion of trust, right? And so, but what would it look like if I had the language to say, okay, is it that I don't trust my manager, or is it that I need more feedback? Is it that I don't trust my colleague, or do I need a little more follow through? And once we get underneath the reasons why, what's under the root of why we don't trust someone? So it's less for me of trust issues are on the surface, but the root of it is a communication crisis. There's an expectation that people have inside the workplace that's not being met, therefore trust is eroded. Well, what if that person knew what the reasons were that the trust was eroded? Because nobody's going around the workplace with a crystal ball saying, what is it that Minda needs from me today, right? I have to be part of letting them know what that trust looks like. And so, long story short, I'm speaking at companies, I get direct messages, emails, and people will tell me, I don't trust my manager, I don't trust my colleague, I don't trust HR, fill in the blank. And what I found is that what they were saying was, yes, they didn't trust, but there was a reason why they didn't trust. And it kept falling within one of these 7 buckets that I call the 7 trust languages. And it made me think, okay, if people have love languages in their other relationships, what are our trust languages inside of a professional setting? And that's what led me to kind of uncover, what they're really saying is they need more transparency. And if they had more
Mm.
transparency, then they'd have a little more trust, right? And that's a different kind of conversation than coming to you and saying, I don't trust you anymore. But what if I reframe it and say, we just had a layoff and I realized that you might not be able to tell me everything, but I really value spirit of transparency. If I have questions, can I ask them of you? And can we partner on how to find solutions? That provides a little more leeway and a little more runway for us to have a dialogue about what's going on. The person listening to you may not be able to tell you everything, but now they know your expectation and we're closing a gap, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's a more productive conversation to be
Yeah.
able to talk about what led to that mistrust, and
Hmm.
it sounds like also that trust is typically a symptom and not really the root cause.
Yes.
So, I would love for you to break down some of these 7 trust languages.
Don't mind if I do. No. But what I found that people weren't saying were these things that they really needed. And the 7 trust languages are transparency, and that's essentially clarity and honesty, security, that intellectual, physical, and emotional belonging or psychological safety, demonstration, doing what you say, right? The action, feedback, meaningful and consistent insight, acknowledgement, seeing people and their work, sensitivity. We probably need this one more than ever in the workplace today, but being mindful of our behaviors and our impact. And lastly, follow through, keeping your word. And I think that a lot of us can, even just hearing that, we can think, oh, okay, maybe this is my primary, this is my secondary, this is my tertiary language. And what would it look like to be able to create conversations that get us closer to what we need instead of just tapping out, right? Letting people know what good looks like to us.
So good, so good. My wheels are turning when I hear all of those trust languages because, it just really illuminates the breakdown that takes place on one side or another
Hmm.
with relationships, whether business, I mean, even personal relationships. So are you finding or have you found that there's some of those trust languages that are harder to build or develop than others?
I think that what I found is I've been doing some talks around the 7 trust languages at different companies recently. And I find that transparency seems to maybe be a little hard on leaders at times, right? Because there's certain
Mhm.
information that they're not able to divulge in that moment. But I also have to remind them that speaking someone's language of transparency isn't saying everything from A to Z. I grew up in a house where my parents would be like, don't tell everybody your business, right? So transparency was one of those things where,
Right?
so you were very, mindful about the things that you were sharing outside of the house. But being transparent isn't telling all your business. It's also saying, hey, I don't have all the information right now and I'm not able to provide that, but I want you to know I have an open door. So as things arise, I have your best interests at mind. That's going to ease the anxiety and the fear of somebody who needs to hear that, right? So, for example, we have a lot going on in the workplace, a lot of changes, a very polarizing environment that many of us are working in. And so, if for some reason you work at a company and diversity, equity, inclusion is no longer a priority, what would it look like for leadership to say, you know what? I know that the trust is probably hanging on by a thread right now. In order to demonstrate that trust is still important, yes, we don't have these programs anymore, but we are committed to every single person in this workplace, right? We still want the
Mhm.
advancement of Black employees. We still want the advancement of those with disabilities or those over 50, right? Like that's still important to us, no matter what we call it. we want you to know that you have a place here. That would bring more trust to the room, right? Instead of pretending that there's nothing to see here. And we've all been in a situation where trust was there at 9 a.m. and somebody did or said something and it was gone by 9:10, right? And you have no place to
Yeah.
put that. And you want to be able to talk about it, but there's no words. And so Talk to Me Nice, my new book is exciting because I have a bunch of scripts, ways to identify what your trust languages are, but not just us, because trust is a two-way street. What are the people on our team? What are their trust languages, right? How do we get the most out of them as well? And so my hope is that we make trust great again in the workplace.
That is beautiful. And so I'm curious, when I think about the trust languages, and you reference the five love languages in your book as well. And when I was thinking about the two, right? So I, when I was, when my husband and I were going through like premarital counseling, we had to read the five love languages. And I know for me, mine is words of affirmation. Like that's my primary, and that's what I give to show love. That's what I prefer to receive to show love. And so, with regards to the seven trust languages, is it similar in terms of there's a primary that I have that I show or demonstrate for trust
Mhm.
and need in order to build trust or trustworthy or look for in terms of trustworthiness?
Yeah, I think there's some similarities, right? So I would say that I probably have three of these languages, but if somebody's speaking at least one of them to me, I'm a happy camper, just like the love languages. And two, in the workplace, we may not speak all of these, but let's be bilingual to some degree, right? And give people what they
Mm.
need to be successful. And so I'm a words of affirmations girly too. And, I think, and so part of that is, I think, if we think about the things that we need, if we hone in, I have an exercise in one of the chapters is, you know, maybe you don't know what you need, but you realize, oh, okay, it would be nice if I got more feedback. I haven't received feedback on a project in the last, 6 months. How do I ask for that, right? Without somebody
Yeah.
being defensive. And so words of affirmation, I notice acknowledgement is important, right? We want to be recognized for the work we're doing, for the time we're putting in. You don't have to make me employee of the week every week, but I want some acknowledgement to some degree, right? And sometimes it's hard to ask for that. And so my hope is that I'm helping provide language for people to be able to do that and identify what the root cause of what they're not getting, why there's this expectation gap in the workplace. And 9 times out of 10, it's because the person that you work for or with doesn't know you need that. And it goes back to the love languages, right? We sometimes, I keep giving you security, but that's not really what you need from me right now. You need me
Right.
to demonstrate, show you action, to be committed to the things that I say I'm going to do. And so I think this is just a way for us to, even when we make a mistake, reset the trust button and show people that we're dedicated, that trust isn't a one-time experience, it's a workplace culture.
Oh, so good. I would love to get your perspective on something. So, I have a family member who had an unfortunate experience where they had accepted a job that was virtual, was doing work. When it was time for them to get paid, they didn't get paid. And come to find out, it was a scam.
Mm,
And as they were learning about this, they for another new job and thought, oh, this internet is going to work for me. And discovered because of the first situation, realized, oh, this may not be legitimate either. So when we were talking through and I had asked them, well, what do you think the lesson is here? Not from a judgment
mhm.
perspective, but just like, okay, when things like this happen, there's usually some type of lesson. And they said, not to trust anybody. And I said, well, I don't know if that's the lesson. So I'm curious from your perspective, Minda, as do you think we should start with trust? Or do you think trust is something that needs to be earned in order to be given?
I well, that is an unfortunate e series of events that, happened, and I'm really sorry about that, and I think that's part of why some of us do have some trust issues because we're holding on to some baggage of a bad employer or a bad colleague, or we got, backstabbed or laid off or whatever, and so sometimes we take those trust issues into our new environment that we need to hit the reset button because that isn't the same place. Yes, you might have some behaviors that might manifest and you want to stay eyes wide open to those things, but give yourself permission to be able to have a different experience. And so I believe that we should all start with a full cup of trust until somebody shows us different, right? And then you start to pour little by little and you'll know. But I think we all deserve that fresh start no matter what, because we've all made a mistake, or like the Facebook um, profile said, it's complicated, right? We've all been in a situation where we've made some missteps or said the thing that we wish we could, take back. And that could be an erosion of trust. But I would encourage everybody to be able to say, start with the allow people to show you who they are, right? And then you go from there, because maybe that third time is going to show you, you know what, we can restore trust. But be aware, be mindful. But I do think we can absolutely give people the benefit of the doubt as a starting point.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. And it's hard when we've been burned,
It's hard.
and,
It's hard.
it's it's hard, but I think it is necessary because, when we're building a relationship with someone, from I can think about it from a recipient
Mhm.
perspective. Like, I would want people to assume trust from me.
Yeah.
So it certainly is mutual. So thank you for that. Well, we talked about culture, trust being a foundational element of culture. And so, what are some of the dangers when we are trying to build cultures, but trust isn't at the center or at the foundation like it should be? Like, what are some of those risks and dangers?
Yeah, I think we have to also be honest and kind of dissect what are some of the behaviors that are eroding trust from the start. So I often tell people that every day we show up in the workplace or we show up online, we're presented with a scenario that takes place in our workplace. Two things happen. We make a decision, right? And that decision has an impact. And that impact is either going to enhance trust or erode trust. But I think we're all moving, 100,000 miles per hour in the workplace. And we're not thinking how, oh, if I keep micromanaging, yeah, that's going to erode trust, right? If I CC somebody on that email that has no business being CC'd, is the impact on that going to enhance trust with the person I sent it to or erode trust, right? And I don't think anybody shows up in the workplace and says, who can I erode trust with today, right? I don't think they're that sinister. But those decisions impact how the trust outcomes come. And I think we have to be aware of how our decisions are impacting people on our team, not just our go-to people, but everybody that we're working with. And looking at some of those behaviors, the micromanaging, the gossiping, right? Who's being promoted, who isn't, the onboarding experience, the employee journey, all of that dictates if we have a high or low trust environment. And what I want people to think about is how are we cultivating trust each and every day, right? We shouldn't make blanket statements that nobody trusts HR. HR should be the place where people can trust. So if it's not a place for that, what are we doing to rebrand to make sure that trust is a key component, right? And so for me, again, it's just reminding us of the things that are important to us, but expecting them at the workplace as well, because we're going to spend more time or just as much time of our lives in the workplace, as I said before. And so we have to make trust the catalyst. And when we don't get it, we have to tell people what we need. And lastly, I'll just add this. There's a stat that came out that said 80% of people will leave a workplace that they like, but when a conflict arises, they'll just leave without having a conversation. So I'm asking people
Mm.
to let's have a conversation and find out what's going on and what's underneath before we create a narrative in our head that, oh, they hate us, they don't want us to be successful and all the things, right? Let's find out if we tell them that we need to be acknowledged a little bit more, maybe they can provide that, right? Or the other thing is maybe they can't, and now that's information that we have so we can make our next best move and find a more trusting environment.
Yes, yes. I'm hearing so much in that. So there's awareness,
Hmm.
having that level of awareness. We can't change anything that we're not aware of. Facing fears, like, what you just talked about, people not wanting to have the conversation. Why don't we want to have the conversation? Because we are afraid. We are, avoiding conflict. And we typically avoid conflict because we're fearful about what will happen. It's not comfortable. So this is real life stuff that if we can this is such a great conversation because it gives us the opportunity to build some of these muscles that will create healthier workplaces in the long run. So one question that I receive a lot, and I've had this conversation with so many clients over the past 5 years, is how do you build trust when teams work remotely? So,
Hmm.
do you have any thoughts about how teams can build that trust when they're not, having the water cooler conversations?
Yeah, I mean, that's a reality, right? I think that um, people are nervous or concerned about their upward trajectory in the workplace because they're not seeing each other as often, right? But the ways in which we can show up. So, as an employee, how can we build trust? How can we show trust? So, let's say, for example, you have a manager who doesn't really want anybody working from home, right? They're one of those people like you can't do your job from the house, all of the things. And so for them, they're the type, well, I need to know that you're responsive on Microsoft Teams, right? Or I need to know that you're responsive. You're showing your face on the video conferencing. So these are ways. If we know that that's what someone needs to establish trust, then what would it look like for us to make sure that we are a little more responsive inside the chat? Or what could it look like if we turn on our camera every now and then so that people see our face, they see the bed behind, right? And they see the
Mhm,
couch so
mhm.
that they know that yes, I can, yes, and I can work from home and I can be productive, right? And sometimes we have to demonstrate what is that person's trust language that they need from me. I know that I'm getting my work done, but I might need to show up to certain, online bingo games after hours or whatever it is for team building, right? Those are ways that we get to establish trust and show up because those are the only ways that we have at the time. But then as leaders, how do we build trust in a remote environment? Probably having some monitoring system on the computer is not a way to build trust, right? Or micromanaging every single thing it is not a good thing. Or constantly canceling one-on-ones when you know you only have one once a month, right? These are the ways that erode trust, and it also tells a story that that may or may not be true. And so I want us to remember that the human element of the workplace. Yes, we talk about AI and all of those different things, but the future of work is also dependent on the human aspect, the human connection. And so we can't throw that to the side just because we're in a virtual environment. And so I think that we have an opportunity to build even more trust in these kind of virtual streets.
Yes, yes. Well, if you are just joining us and you have a question on LinkedIn Live, please put it in the chat, and we will do our best to cover as many as possible. Minda, I want to go back to something that you just said about, how organizations or leaders may erode trust. And I think sometimes it happens without even knowing it. Like they create policies that seem like they are fine,
Mhm.
logical policies, but they're not seeing the impact of it. One conversation that I've had with many colleagues is, my company said that we would be virtual, and now they're requiring people to come back to work, and they're monitoring swipes, and so all of that is happening. What are some of the other examples that you've seen where leaders or organizations are, demonstrating some things or requiring some things that they don't realize is eroding trust with their people?
Yeah, I think people forget that trust is earned. And so one of the trust languages is demonstration. So we have to demonstrate trust each and every day. That is an action. And so if you demonstrate that we can all work in a remote work environment, and then you say get back to work on Monday, not understanding all of the things that people are dealing with in their own jobs, caretaking in their lives. Maybe the commute is now 2 hours where it used to be they lived closer. All of these different things. What would it look like to say, listen, we thought that we could have a remote work environment. We realized that, due to certain, real estate issues, whatever the case, we need everybody to start to migrate back to the office. Let's start with maybe 4 days a week, work from home. Let's come into the office one day. Let's gear up till we get to 3. If you need additional support, let's talk about that, right? That's going to establish trust, even though essentially it's not what you said, it's how you said it. Eventually, we're all going to be back in the office. But if we say, hey, just be happy to have a job, if you don't like it here, find another one, that isn't demonstrating that trust is present and that you can be safe when you come back into the office, right? And so,
Yeah.
again, I want leaders to think about, remember what it was like when you were on the other side of the table? Human first, employee second, right? We can all get back to the office, but let's build trust as we do that, so that when everybody gets back, because that's another anxiety, another level if you haven't been working in an office for the last 5 years, right? And so understanding
Yeah.
that people are not robots. And I see this time and time again, and I think leaders are just not thinking about what it's like on the other side. And so part of that is also, again, the self advocacy piece is, what would it look like to have a conversation with our manager to say, I understand we all have to get back to the workplace, but I actually am now caretaking for my father. And how would it, for the next 6 months, would it be possible if I only come into the office 2 days a week, and we'll gear up and touch base in 6 months? You're letting them know what good looks like to you. And from there, they understand what your expectation was. And there might be some wiggle room to build trust, right? And if they're not able to do that, then that's also some information for you. And so I feel like, again, it's less about trust being the issue, but it's the communication breakdown. We're not talking to each other nice, right? And if we have the
Yeah.
words to be able to communicate better, then again, we close this expectation gap of what you might need. Because again, somebody doesn't know that you've been caretaking for the last 4 years, perhaps. Right.
Right.
And so, again, I don't know about you, but I know I've created a whole narrative of why this isn't going to work and what they're going to say. And when I've actually gave myself permission to have the conversation, I found, oh, okay, this actually turned out better than I had planned. Right.
Yes, yes. So good, so good. One of the things you talk about in the book is temperature checks. So, trust temperature checks. So, what is one simple yet powerful thing that leaders can do to really check the trust temperature on their teams?
Yeah, this makes me think about something someone posted in the chat about companies kind of seeing trust as a weakness or a bad word, because, right, nobody wants to admit that there's no trust inside the workplace, right?
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
so how do we get down to, again, the root? Because trust is a good thing. It's a great thing. That should be part of our values statement. And so, what I would say, one temperature check is to ask your team, what does trust look like to you? Right? What
Ooh.
does trust look like to you? And simple, simple.
Simple.
Simple. We don't need $1 trillion initiative to ask that question, right? This is,
Yes.
and the next one-on-one, what does trust look like to you? And then the second, if you really want to jump into the deep end of the pool, has there been a time where I've eroded trust with you? I'd love to talk about that. Okay?
Ooh.
Because again,
Ooh, can we have some real
can
conversations?
we have some real conversations? Because again, I don't feel anybody intentionally erodes trust in the workplace, but sometimes it happens, right? So what would
Yeah.
it be to give somebody the space to say, yeah, actually, when you talked about um, my hair in the last all staff meeting, that really made me retreat a bit and I lost a little bit of trust. I'd really appreciate if we could practice a little more sensitivity with some of these certain conversations as they arise, right? That gives some room, right? Because again,
Yeah.
the power dynamics when it comes to trust, you talked about fear. I may not feel comfortable or safe to be able to tell you what you said to me in last week's all staff, bothered me, right? Without that fear of retribution. And so you take the power and say, hey, you tell me. I'm creating this container for us to talk about what it looks like. And now we're going to get to, oh, Minda needs a little more sensitivity from me. Maybe I need to be more aware of what's happening in the world so that I'm not saying these jokes on and thinking that it's comedy night at the Apollo. I'm actually eroding trust with her, right? And now I've opened up the space for us to be able to talk about those things. And this provides a better workplace for everybody. At the end of the day, we all just want to do our best work. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes, and what that those simple questions, what it opens up is intimacy. And I know
Yes.
intimacy is such a core component to build strong trust with people.
Hmm.
And, we hear the power of vulnerability. And even in the work that we do at the Asbury Group, we talk about, well, the definition of vulnerability is exposing yourself to harm. And we don't want you to do that. What we want you to do is be open, to be candid, to have intimacy here. Because when we can take that deep breath and have those hard conversations and create some openness for intimacy, then we can connect at a deeper level. And if I know that there's something that I did that impacted you negatively and I didn't mean to, and we can have a real conversation, a productive conversation about that, we can have a stronger relationship as an outcome. Or if you share something with me that was really hard to share, maybe it's something personal, and I hold that in high regard and in confidence, then now we have a stronger bond. And at the end of the day, that's what we want, right? And
Yes.
we can't do that if we feel like, oh, well, they're out to get me, or, all of the assumptions that we may, or baggage we may bring to um, relationships from other relationships.
That part. That
Yes.
part.
Yes.
Yes.
So again, if you have any questions for Minda, please put them in the chat. I just have a couple of more questions for you, Minda. As you think about this book that is being birthed into the world next month, what is your deepest desire for the book?
My goal is, for those who may not know, this is my fourth book. And the first three books that I wrote, The Memo, Right Within, and You Are More Than Magic, they were centered around the experiences of women of color in the workplace. And I called this next book my crossover album because trust is a global language, right? People in Tokyo want trust, people in North Dakota want trust, people in Los Angeles want trust. And if we could speak that language just a little bit more, then I think that we could start to have conversations that we weren't able to have years ago. I think that some of the conversations that we were having the last few years weren't all rooted in trust, right? And so that made some people tap out to the conversation because they're like, what about me? If you're focusing on them, what about me? So everybody was feeling and side-eyeing everybody inside the workplace. And so my goal is to let's recenter respect in the workplace. And then maybe from there, we can talk about some of the experiences of other people because now we're rooting our conversations in humanity, dignity, and respect. And so I hope that people who may not have read my books before, they'll start with Talk to Me Nice, and then they'll go back and read more because they'll have a better understanding and more trusting outlook on what the experiences of some of their colleagues might be dealing with.
I love it. I love it. And I'm personally excited to bring Talk to Me Nice into the conversations that our team is having about trust in the workplace and highlighting this great work, Minda, because it's so
Thank you.
important. It is so, so critical now. Well, we are at the point of our conversation that we call the final five. So I have five quick fire questions for you,
All
my friend. I know
right.
that we've done this before, and I don't remember which ones you've answered before. So we'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
what I need from you is to pick five numbers between the numbers of 1 and 22.
Okay. So I'm gonna go 1,
Mm-hmm.
8,
Mm-hmm.
um, 22.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, 20
Mm-hmm.
and 7.
Okay, awesome. This is gonna be good. So the first question, friend, is when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Ah, this is great. I'm gonna tell you where my mind was as a child. But as a child, I actually wanted to be work at the airport because I'm like, oh, they're around all these planes and they get to travel. Yeah. At first, my aspirations was flight attendant, but for those who've never met me in person, I just wasn't going to be able to put anybody's bags up top, and so I just didn't hit the height requirement. But I just felt like, man, this is a stable career. I would, at the airport, and so I just always envied as a little girl. It's like I want to work at the airport when I get. And I always have flight privileges, so that was a big deal for me back then.
That is so good. Is there a height requirement? I never thought about that. I
Yeah,
wouldn't make
there
it either.
is. There's a height
Mm,
requirement. You have to be able to
yeah.
lift somebody's bags up,
Mm,
easily.
mm,
There used to be
yeah.
anyway. There used to be. I wonder if they
Yeah.
changed
It
it to
wouldn't
be.
it wouldn't it I wouldn't make it either, Minda. I wouldn't make it either. Okay, the next question is what are some of the things that you do to keep your skills sharp?
I am a big proponent of investing in yourself, and so I'm always taking courses or writing classes or going to conferences because I always want to be learning, and I feel like we can't be creative if we're not putting ourselves in the space to create and hear from others as well.
I love it. I am with you. So the next question is, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Bless me. The best advice that I've received is don't be ambivalent about your career. And I think that
Mm,
that is important. And it's always served me well because we've worked so hard to get to where we are. We shouldn't want to lean out.
yes.
Yeah.
What is something that you love to do that some people may be surprised by?
Now this one an exclusive that many people do not know this at all. But what I love to do is when I have the time, I haven't been able to do it recently, but I like to rent out a studio and I like to go rap. I like to spit bars in the
What?
booth.
What?
And I like to. It's a way for me to be creative again. And I love to, for those who listen to my podcast, I love, or read books, I love music. I love rap lyrics and grits.
Rap
And
rap lyrics and grits. That is Minda Harts.
I love it. And so people don't know that I do like to, just for me, go in and make songs and rap and get it off my chest and move on with my day. So that's something that I like to do.
Have you ever done any freestyle
You know,
on on a podcast
I
before?
have I have
No.
never done a freestyle on a podcast, but years ago, even before I became an author, I was in my 9 to 5. This is another exclusive, my friend. I decided I'm very shy. People know I'm a very much an introvert, but I like to push myself. I'm a functioning introvert, and so when I was maybe like 25, I put myself into an open mic night and I did one of my own songs because I wanted to
What?
push I invited 5 of my friends, and I did one of my rap songs. I did a cover and had lines, and I've never done it again, but it was my moment to be able to put myself out there, and I still have a video of it. So maybe one day I'll share it.
Yes, we need to see this. Can we get a line? Can we get a line? Just one. You remember any of the
No,
lines?
no lines. That's that's beyond the business suit after dark. Okay.
Beyond the business suit after dark, where we're gonna have to have the after dark show.
Yes, yes.
That's I'm gonna need to see that. I want to hear that. Somebody. So I have one more question, and then we're going to ask or have some of the listener questions as well, because I see some good ones coming through. But the last question is, what is one book that has impacted your life?
That's a good man. There's so many, but I would probably say I know it sounds cliche, but I would definitely say the Bible, because I grew up going to church, but I didn't really start to dig in and to find what the truth meant for me until later in my life. And it really helps me figure out my advocacy, because Jesus was an advocate. He was an advocate for the folks in the streets, and he was a truth teller. And once I realized my role and my purpose, I am not saying I'm like Jesus by any stretch, but I realized that my mission was to use my mouth and my microphone and be a truth teller for those who may not feel comfortable telling the truth inside the workplace. And so it really helped me, give me agency in a way that I hadn't looked at it before.
Well, I think that certainly is a reflection
Yeah.
of Jesus, for
Yes.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Well, we have some questions, so I want to share some of the questions. So one is, I know right off the bat we're told don't trust. I'm assuming it means no one at work, coworkers, management, administration, HR, etc. So automatically your walls are up and you're on the defense. In what small ways can I, as an employee, make and create space in our own workplace to establish better open relationships with our coworkers and leadership? Such a great question.
Such a great question. And I think, obviously pre-order the book, but in the meantime, what I would say is, I mentioned it at the top, middle of our hour, is ask people, what does trust look like to you? We want a more trusting work environment, and we want to build stronger relationships in the workplace. What does trust look like to you? Or what does good look like to you? And what you understand, and kind of listen to what people are saying, but also listen to what they're not saying, right? The nonverbal cues. And I think you'll find that people either want one of these 7 things or a couple. They want either more transparency, they want more acknowledgement, they want more feedback, they want more follow through, they want more security, and they want more demonstration. And so understanding what people need and asking helps us close any expectation that people have of us that we weren't aware of. And I think that's where trust issues start to pop up, is because we don't know about these expectations that weren't vocalized to us,
Yes.
right? And so those are really easy and practical ways and steps that we could start demonstrating that. Because if I know that you need more follow through from me, then that's something that I'm going to attempt to provide, right? If I keep canceling all of our meetings, or I keep telling you I'm going to make an introduction to a friend of mine for you, and it's 6 months later and I still haven't made that introduction, I want you to feel comfortable to come and ping me and say, Minda, you said that you were going to make that. And I'm like, man, I'm sorry. I know that I should have followed through on that. I'm going to do that right now. Right. And even acknowledging that I didn't follow through is following through. Okay.
Yes.
And that helps. That helps. Not pretending that when I see you at the next event, I'm trying to avoid you, because I now know that I did it. I didn't do what I said I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's also having some accountability, and we are all going to make mistakes. And again, I don't think we intentionally erode trust with people, but let's also think not just about that person that popped in our head that we thought, oh man, they eroded trust with me just an hour ago. What are we doing to erode trust with people, right? What do we need to do to reconcile some relationships that can be um, rebuilt. And I want us to be thinking about trust really as a two-way street in the workplace.
So good. Yes. Grace and accountability, right?
Yes.
And somebody said, yes, this your book is a manual to navigate the world. I believe that. Yes, given all that's happening today for sure. So I got a couple of fun ones. One, do you still host your LinkedIn lives on Mondays?
I don't, and I get a lot of heat from that I don't do it as
We miss
often,
them. But you're
but
busy. You are
I
busy.
I had to take some self-care, not to do all the things, but I restarted my podcast, Secure the Seat. So make sure that you go listen to that. So that's my way of kind of going back to my LinkedIn lives in a sense. So I hope you'll follow along.
Yes, definitely listen to Secure the Seat. And finally, this is a very important question. I know the answer to this one because I listened to Secure the Seat, and that is sugar or salt on your grits, Minda.
There's only one way, and I'm going to say it out loud because I trust no one that puts sugar on their grits. So it's salt all day, but as I get older, it's less salt.
Less salt, but definitely savory.
Savory.
Definitely savory. Well, Minda, I am so excited for you. I am so thankful for you taking the time to share this great work that you're doing. I am celebrating you as you birth your fourth book into the world because I know that it will make such a tremendous impact globally on so many people, leaders, organizations. And so July 22nd, right, is the launch date. Please pre-order. Talk to me nice. We will put, if you're listening to the podcast, we will have links to purchase the book in the show notes. As we close, Minda, are there any final words that you have for those who are listening in? And also anything that you want to share in terms of how people can follow your work and stay connected with you?
Well, first off, I just want to say thank you for always seeing me and supporting me. We've been friends for a really long time, and you demonstrate that I can trust you each and every time around. So thank you for how you show up. It means so much to me. And I want to thank all of you for trusting us and chiming in with us today. It means a lot. And, I would just ask people to consider what trust looks like for you. We have a lot going on in the workplace, and sometimes we need to get under the hood and find out what we need more of in the workplace. And what if it works out? What if you can get one of these 7 trust language spoken to you by your manager or a colleague? And what could it look like to restore a relationship that might have been broken in the workplace unintentionally? And so I'm hoping that each of us can, just like we added the 5 love languages into our cultural zeitgeist, that we can add the 7 trust languages into our workplace cultures. And you can follow me here on LinkedIn, hit the follow button.
Beautiful. Minda, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who joined in today. We will see you next time. Everybody be well.